Okay, we're live. Hi, or recording actually. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest. She goes by Criminal Justice Chris, and you will see her Medium page here. And she's been writing a lot recently, and she reached out to me about the Son of Sam or Sons of Sam cases. She's covered some of the elements that I'm not familiar with, and I have to say I'm pretty familiar with a lot of the Son of Sam and Sons of Sam case history or case histories, a lot of the circumstances surrounding these cases, as I've done so many shows. I mean, I really am looking through my catalog. And I've done shows with Rocker Mike about Wendy Savino. I've done before Son of Sam with Jonathan Mitchell in 2021. I've done Son of Zodiac, how the Zodiac and Son of Sam serial murders were meant to usher in the coming of Satan with author Jack Myers from 2019. And Chris mentions this in one of her articles, actually. I was pleasantly surprised to see that. I was with Thomas Henry Horan about Berkowitz not acting alone. Roberta Glass and I of the True Crime Report talks the Sons of Sam, so the plural Sons of Sam documentary, the Zeman documentary. I've also done Michael Benson when he published his book, The Wicked King Wickard, the Son of Sam Siege of New York in 2021. And then I also did, fairly recently, I talked with author Mike Caparelli. The title of his book is Monster Mirror, 100 Hours with David Berkowitz, known as the Son of Sam. It has 143 5-star reviews. It's a great book, a lot of great information. But Chris has done her homework too. She's done a lot of really great information. We're going to talk about some things maybe people have heard about and people haven't heard about, but I'm delighted to have her. So Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So for people who may not have heard your name or seen your Medium site, which I will put links to in the show notes so people can just click through and look at your articles, maybe you can talk about your background, how you met Berkowitz, and then what led you to start kind of writing about these cases.
My background, I have undergraduates in psychology and English and criminal justice. I have minors in cultural anthropology, quantitative studies, social and behavioral methodologies, as well as classical studies. I have several research certifications. I watched the documentary several years ago on Netflix, and I started examining the letters as well as the symbol because I felt like I could comprehend what was being written as well as analyzing the symbol. I came across quite a bit of information doing initial research. I reached out to Carl Denaro, provided him with some of the research, and Carl and I started talking. As we talked, he said that David had stopped contacting him, and whenever he wrote and explained some of the background, what had led up to it. Because of my background, I agreed to start contacting David in July of 2022 to see if I could get additional information from him related to who possibly could have shot Carl. I was not really expecting a whole lot, to be honest. I've grown to be very fond of David. I consider him a friend at this point. I also consider Carl to be a friend.
Okay, gotcha. Carl, yeah, I also interviewed Carl. I forgot to mention him. His book is The Truth About Why I Wasn't Shot by David Berkowitz. That's from 2021. And I also talked to Dana Duda about kind of Maury Terry process. And we've done a show about Ed Sanders, which a lot of people don't know this. And I didn't know that as well. But Sanders and Terry were close friends. They were research partners. They wrote blurbs about each other's books and stuff like that.
Yes.
So that was kind of new information to me. So Denaro, you consider Denaro a friend. Berkowitz, have you visited him or just talked to him through the kind of...
I have conversed with him extensively through U.S. mail and through Securus. I have not talked to him over the phone. I have not visited him. We're in different states. There's a considerable distance between us. So no, I would not visit him in prison at this point.
God, he's in New York. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And so you mentioned this symbol. There's kind of this famous kind of symbol associated, goetic symbol associated with some of these letters, for people who don't know, letters were sent, I think, to Jimmy Breslin et al., or among others, that had this kind of strange circular symbol. Can you talk about that?
My opinion of the symbol, the Son of Sam symbol, is if you look at it, you'll see on each side, you'll see on one side there's an Aphrodite symbol. On the other side, there's a symbol to Mars. On the top, there's a cross. On the bottom is an S. What I did in order to basically decrypt and reconstruct the symbol is I used numerology. The numerological equivalent to Aphrodite is 6. The numerological equivalent to Mars or Aries is 9. So you have two inversions right away on the opposite side of each other. In alchemy, inversions cancel one another out and they make a 0. On the bottom of the symbol, you have an S, because both Aphrodite and Mars are essentially Roman or Greek. I use the Phoenician system in order to convert the bottom and the top. So the bottom, there's an S. I believe that translates to Semek, which has the numerological equivalent to 60. If you break that down, 6 plus 0, that's a 6. And then on the top, you have a cross, which is the equivalent to 9 or Tet in the Phoenician system. So you have the inversions, again, they cancel each other out. You have an X in the center, you take the circle, and you have the zodiac symbol, or the squaring the circle sign with Aleister Crowley. If you want to do it another way, in order to proof it a second way, you can take the X in the center and convert it to a Roman numeral, which is 10. The 6s and the 9s going each way look like an astrological crab, which is a Cancer sign, and an astrological chart that converts to a 4. So you have 4s going both ways, where you have the 44 caliber killings. And then if you add the 4 and the 4 together, you get an 8, and then add the 10 and the 8 together, you get 18. You break it down, 1 plus 8, which is 9. And 9 in the Greek system translates out to theta, and it looks exactly like that. It's a circle with a cross in the center. Other variations for theta are also a circle with a dot in the center and a circle with a horizontal line. It's essentially an old sun symbol, so it's associated with sun worship. Does that make sense? Hello?
I'm muted. Sorry, I'm talking to myself. I'm muted.
Okay.
So it's based on the Goetic Eliphas Levi symbol. Is that right?
David had said it was loosely based on the Goetic Eliphas Levi circle, or symbol. I'm going to assume that he's right based on the names and the symbol. I have associated it with the Book of Enoch. So you have Berkeliel, you have Amazarach, you have Azrael, and you have Achabiel. Barachakiel is associated with the seasons and also lightning. Achabiel is associated with marrying human wives. Amrazak is associated with root cutting, and Azrael is associated with the moon. The Goetia circle, or the symbol, can be traced to Eliphas Levi. Aleister Crowley believed that he was the reincarnation of Eliphas Levi, and if you continue to trace it, he also believed that he was the reincarnation of Castigliano.
Cagliostro.
Yeah. Right? I'm sorry, I slaughtered it. Edward Kelly, right, and also a Borgia. Right. Edward Kelly was associated with John Dee, who was an advisor to Queen Elizabeth, and they believe that they came into contact through scrying with deities and created an Enochian language.
Right. So Kelly and D was the seer and Kelly was the scryer. So
Yeah, and according to historical accounts, the Enochian deities didn't care for Kelly and got along better with Dee, and yeah.
that's a whole nother show.
Yes.
It is a weird thing, but yeah. So Crowley was born in 1875. Levy or Alfred Lewis Constant dies in 1875.
Mm-hmm.
So, so he believes he's carrying on the tradition. And Crowley actually, I think, translated a version of Eliphas Levi's, the Goetia of all things. So, like, there's a real strong kind of occult current between them leading up to these guys who kind of morphed it. And you can see it on here, this symbol. This is from your Medium page if anybody's watching this video on here. But I can also draw up the Eliphas Levi symbol too, because you can just see the kind of clear similarities. It's just not even, arguable. Let me see if
there are similarities. And I mean, also, if you continue to investigate the Goetia circle and tie in with seasons, most of the victims with the Son of Sam shootings were shot during seasonal shifts.
Okay, can you talk about that? Because you actually have a lot of lunar seasons and things like that in one of your...
Like Donna Loria, she was shot on July 29th on Lunasa, and she was shot under a waxing moon. Carl De Niro was shot on the 23rd of October, which is near Samhain. He was shot under a waning moon. Damasi and Lamino were shot around Thanksgiving. Now, technically, it's not really a seasonal shift, but I guess you could include that as seasons if you wanted to. They were shot on the 27th of November under a waxing. Freund and Deal were shot on the 30th of January near Mblock. They were shot on a waxing moon. Boskarichian was shot on March 8th, and that was under a waning moon. And she was shot on International Women's Day, which has its pagan roots in the March equinox.
Wow. Yeah, I believe it.
Isa and Suriani were shot on the 17th of April. Beltane falls on the 1st of May, and there's a 13-day period prior to Beltane, which is the blood sacrifice to the beast. They were shot on a waning cycle. Placido and Lupo were shot on the 26th of June. They were shot near the summer solstice, which is the 21st of June. The Roman Empire solstice was on the 24th of June, so that's closer. They were shot under a waxing cycle, and then Moskowitz and Violante were shot on Lunasa, which is the 31st of July. And they were shot under a waning. So you have half and half. You have 8 victims. You have 8 shootings, half under a waning, half under a waxing. So you have the 44 symbolism again. It's the crimes were very well planned. I don't know what else to say.
Right. So
then 9 people survived and 6 were killed, and then you have the 9 and the 6 symbolism again. It's very odd.
It is odd. All at night too, right? So it's all late night shooting, things like that, right? So
yes.
So you think that they're really? I mean, I've researched the smiley face killings and tried to find moon kind of magic or something associated with it, and people have looked in and kind of found some interesting things. But this particular moon cycles is more compelling, I think.
I would agree, because it makes the crimes look more premeditated, and you have to wonder how well they were planned. I mean, it's been stated that the crimes were planned with certain members of the group present, including process church members being present at the meeting and whomever else was there. So you have to wonder how well these were planned ahead of time.
Right.
And why certain victims were chosen, and what the motivation was behind it, other than sacrifice.
So there's an occult motivation, not just sacrifice, right?
Yeah, I think that there's an occult motivation with sacrificing people, and you have to have certain things line up particularly well in order for, quote unquote, the occultism to work properly, if you want to believe in that or not.
It's what they think.
Yeah.
It's not what we think, or maybe other people who don't think. But people in the cult, they need to get everything lined up to have the most magical impact: dates, times, moon cycles, situation, person, age, so many things. That's kind of like maximizing the magic or the psychological impact. And
I would agree with you. And not to think otherwise would be ethnocentric, because there are certain sects of Islam that are terrorists. There are certain sects of Christianity, the bomb abortion clinics.
Right. Aggressive, like really aggressive. Yeah.
And then there are certain occultists that take the practice and use it for nefarious purposes. And events analysis is coming more into popularity with the FBI and the police, where they look at anniversaries and dates and birthdays and other significant dates that would be popular with religious groups or terrorist groups. Right. And it needs to be taken into consideration when evaluating these crimes.
Right. It kind of fell out of favor, like the thinking, and it's kind of interesting. Like, it may be coming back. People are starting to realize, hey, there's something here. But there was some kind of, I think, the satanic panic kind of views or something disincentivize people from looking into it, maybe. But it's there in certain criminality. I mean, you can go back at the beginning of Ultimate Evil and the death of Arliss Perry, and it's all over the place. I mean, it's super occult.
Yes, I mean, I think we live in a country where we expect freedom of religion, and certain people take offense to their religious beliefs being abused or smeared. And I think that's fair enough, but all the same, it is documented that people who practice the occult and Satanism have a tendency to be more violent. It's documented in the literature. Yeah, and there. you can't just wipe it away any more than you can wipe away saying there are Islamic extremists who have bombed the World Trade Center or have done other illegal activities, or Christians who bomb abortion clinics.
Right.
I think at some point you have to quit being apologists for certain groups' behaviors.
I agree with you. And this event, the Son of Sam, was basically a 1 year, right? From 76 to 77, from July to July, which is also seasonal. It's kind of weird.
Yes.
But it didn't happen in a vacuum. There was all kinds of things happening in New York at the time. Police corruption, other murders. You write about Raniere and Operation Together. Maybe we could start with Raniere, because he's an interesting figure that ties Son of Sam to another important serial killer, right?
Yes. Well, I was provided a letter that John Paul Raniere had sent to David probably about 30 years ago. David sent it to me on June 8th, 2023. This would have been the day that he sat down with Carl De Niro and Mike Caparelli and said that, again, that he shot Carl and reverted. In the letter from John Paul Raniere, it discusses the cult. It discusses the structure a little bit. It implies that he had known David at a younger age, or he had at least seen him in the group, which suggests to me that David was involved at an earlier age, if you read the contents of the letter.
And he was young when he was arrested, too. I think only like 24, 23?
Yeah,
Maybe?
I believe he had just turned 24.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, fairly young guy. So a lot. I mean, yeah, really interesting life. But so Raniere says he's in the group, and Raniere's kind of an interesting character too, right?
Yeah, he had started in the group at a young age. It seems like he was a victim of human trafficking. He hasn't been considered the most reliable figure. I think some of that might be because of a sexual trauma. If you read the letter, he says that he wants David's help remembering certain events. Oh, you probably know way more about Brother John Paul than I do.
He just,
Um,
I think that he was a member, right? I mean, and he
yeah,
also said he had talked with Dahmer at a gay bar.
yes,
Like he was,
he was a member. He wanted to get out at one point. He was roughed up. He was never able to fully exit like a lot of other human trafficking victims. He relocated to Milwaukee. Apparently, he met Jeffrey Dahmer at a bar, which is corroborated by Jeffrey Dahmer. He took Jeffrey Dahmer home. Dahmer was drunk. Dahmer woke up and he had him tied up and he was sexually assaulting him with a candle. And I tend to believe Jeffrey Dahmer's account. I don't really think my personal opinion of Brother John Paul is he never really fully got out.
right. He was still kind of around all this stuff, this kind of darker environments. Can you talk about Operation Together? Because I think it just shows kind of what was going on in the New York area in the 70s.
Um, well, Operation Together was reinvestigated in the later 70s by Senator Ralph Moreno, the NYPD, and Sidney Bobgarden of the Mayor's Midtown Enforcement. It was an 18-month investigation into the premature closing um, of essentially human trafficking in gay bars and narcotics. There was an informant, a confidential informant that was helping in the investigation, which was Ben Rose. He was known in the investigation under the code name Nevada. He had been previously used by the NYPD also under the name GAFF. Um, and he also went by Dr. Rockefeller in the underworld and Quasimodo.
Gotcha. And he was kind of an interest. He was literally a hunchback, right? Involved in child porn
Yes,
or child trafficking. Yeah.
he was literally a hunchback, and his father, Leon Rose, owned the Eldritch Pharmacy. He worked and operated the pharmacy with his father, and he was eventually convicted of illegal drug trafficking related to Quaaludes from the pharmacy.
And there were just a ton of deaths around that time, like just stabbings. And so I think
Yes.
that in January 73, you said that there were 4 days, like 4 people killed over a 4 day period, right?
Yeah, there were quite a few victims. There were, let me see, there were over a 4 day period. I believe it was Cabo, McNiven, Beardsley, and I'm not sure. There might have been another victim. I don't have every single victim listed. The ones that I found were located in the newspaper, and it took a lot of hunting. I have ordered an FOIA from the NYPD, and it has not come in yet. And I don't anticipate that it will come in based on how they handled the case.
Right. Well, case is, right? These are
Yeah,
unsolved.
cases, yes.
And these are like people in the village, right? So the village is the kind of gay area of Manhattan, too, right?
Yes. Yeah, and for instance, Peter Detmold, his has probably been one of the more controversial ones related to Operation Together because he was a very prominent real real estate person in the area, and he was a civic activist. And Carl De Niro recently provided me a document that he had in his possession that's about a 68-page document, and it was an outline for a new book that Maury Terry was planning on writing. And it said in the document that Peter Detmold was renting a property to process church members just a couple blocks away from him. So you have to wonder what the motivations were behind Detmold's murder at this point.
Right.
The NYPD had originally said that they believed that the person that attacked him just did it, and it was random, and they made it sound like it was a robbery gone wrong. Nothing was stolen from him though. Once it was looked into, and his friends were coming forward and saying, no, this man was murdered.
Right. So there were all
intentionally. Yeah.
Right. There was all these killings. They were well known. Like, I think that there were these unsolved killings in the gay leather, like BDSM bars. But I think it actually inspired the movie Cruising, which was really scandalous at the time, which Al Pacino was in. It was William Friedkin's movie. I don't know if you remember that.
No, I don't.
Yeah, but it was like finding a serial killer in the New York, Manhattan gay bars, and a lot of the gay community got really upset. You know, they went berserk. They got really angry about the whole situation.
Well, yeah, I mean they were oppressed for years, and then the mob came in and turned it into a capitalistic organization, which, I mean, that's what the mob does. They extort any type of black market they possibly can. And the LGBTQ community finally just got fed up with them and started rioting.
Right.
Like
so
with Stonewall, for instance.
Wow. And there were all kinds of well-known names, like from the mob too, that were involved here. Mob connection to the big New York families, right?
Sure. Almost every single LGBTQ bar in the Manhattan area or New York City had some type of mob influence within the organization. Like Woods, it's well known that that's really the reason why he lost his life, because he had written a letter stating if something happened to him to look into specific individuals, because he had pissed off the mafia and they were controlling the bar that he was operating, or the discotheque.
Wow. And you came across Jim Rothstein. I know that when I worked for Ed Opperman Report, he talked to Rothstein. So Rothstein was going to write a book too, right?
I have talked to Jim Rothstein a few times over the phone. Sometimes he's not the best to get a hold of. Eric Galati has been friends with him for years, and sometimes it's easier to talk to Eric Galati. Eric Galati used to podcast with Manny Grossman. Eric has been friends with Jim Rothstein for years. Jim has written a memoir. It is not published. You have to request it from him, and he will mail it to you.
I see.
If he's up for it health-wise. I mean, he is getting up in years. Eric has a copy of it, and Eric has provided me copies from certain pages from the memoir whenever Jim hasn't been able to give answers as quickly as he possibly could.
But he's known he was there for all this stuff, right? So
yes, he was part of Operation Together. He did not run it. John Collin headed it. The people that were involved with Operation Together were Bill Cantorino, Danny O'Connell, Maddie Rosenthal, which Maddie was Jim's partner, and then Richie Johnson and Jim Rothstein.
Gotcha. Interesting. And this your most recent post is about Eton Potts. Can you talk about Eton Potts' case and how it kind of ties? There's just a whole environment of these other deaths. There's the deaths of the two couples on an occult holiday too. Like there was a bunch of deaths after Sons of Sam. There was almost like a cleanup operation. Like tons of people died. Yeah.
Well, according to Jim's unpublished memoir and certain Sanders, it's in the Sanders documents as well, and it's in the 68-page document that was provided to me that was an outline to Maury Terry's new book. Eton Patz was last seen with Ben Rose.
Right. So this hunchback, right?
Two different people were sources. One of the sources was John Lentini. I think I'm pronouncing his name right. Lentini. He was incarcerated. He was a prison informant. I'm not sure who the other source's name was. Lentini is no longer alive. He's deceased now, so I feel comfortable saying his name.
Gotcha. So, but there was like a scandal too. Like they had certain names of people who may have killed Tom Patz. There was a civil suit too, right? He was like a 6-year-old kid at a bus station, right, or something like that.
There was a civil suit against Ramos. Ramos knew somebody that was a caretaker for Eton Patz. Apparently, this woman walked him to the bus stop, and Ramos is currently incarcerated, and he is a sexual predator. He's a pederast. So they believed that he did it. He could not be incarcerated for it because they didn't have enough evidence, but the family won a civil suit. But he was incarcerated for pederasty elsewhere, right, not related to Patz. Ramos actually operated a table where he was selling items to the public, and it was in the same neighborhood that Ben Rose lived in. So you have to question if they knew one another. And based on Ben Rose's previous history of child trafficking, because he was arrested for it in the early 70s, you have to wonder if they might have been working together and if Eton Patz was passed off from Ramos to Ben Rose.
Super dark. And yeah. Rose knew Cohn too, like Roy Cohn, right?
Apparently so. Right. Yeah, there were some children, I guess I shouldn't call them children, adolescents, 14 to 15-year-old boys that were allegedly killed in Ben Rose's apartment, and Roy Cohn helped to dispose of the bodies, and they were buried somewhere in Connecticut on a farm, but the bodies were not located. Roy Cohn admitted that he knew something about it. He knew about the murders, but he would not cooperate with law enforcement further than that.
And the whole story of blackmailing UN politicians is a known story in the papers. Like that ring of blackmailing people back in the 70s was a kind of a big story back then, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I have a Senate document. I mean, I can send it to you after the podcast, and it goes into detail about the human trafficking network and how these children were being trafficked throughout the United States and how these bars were tied into it.
Wow, it's really incredible. So it's super dark. Ties into all this stuff like Gacy was involved with the trafficking network and this whole Pegasus and Dean Coral and all this stuff was like, within 10, 15 years, it seems like of each other. Like it's really super dark, like all this stuff, things. And it's really disturbing when you really think about it, like this blackmail stuff. And Cohn was kind of a known friend of our current president, right? I mean, this isn't like old history. This guy who's running the United States now, Cohn was arguably his mentor, is my understanding.
Yes, and he also represented a lot of well-known mafia figures.
Right. So you see this mafia Cohn Trump nexus, New York nexus. I'm not saying Trump's involved in all that stuff. I'm saying that he knows these people,
Yeah.
So,
but I'll just make a joke. Arguably, Trump looks more like the Lamino DeMasi sketch than David Berkowitz. So, I mean,
DeMasi. Can you explain who DeMasi is for people who don't know? This is kind of a new thing, right?
Lamino DeMasi. Their shooting was on November 27th, and they would have been the third shooting during the 44 caliber killings. But yeah, if you look at the Lamino Massey sketch, there are a lot of jokes online that he looks like a young Donald Trump.
Gotcha. Yeah, so you've done a lot of recent stuff. Like, are you working on any other? I mean, you think that some of the Son of Sam letters were like crypt. I mean, it's interesting because the kind of gibberish, that supposed gibberish that's in the Son of Sam letters, reflects some of the gibberish that was, in the culture in the 60s or 70s. Like, these are like cryptic coded messages and stuff. So you think that the Final Sons of Sam letter was a cryptid coded message to Berkowitz's house? Huh?
I do. I also think that there are other cryptic parts of the letter that have been yet to be discovered. Whenever I started analyzing the letters, I mean, one of the first things I did is I wrote them out forward, I wrote them backwards, I looked at them every direction from Sunday, and I also start anything that was backwards. I looked upwards on the internet to see if I could get any occult matches. I think that the letters were designed to induce fear in the public. I think it was fairly effective because women were dyeing their hair, and
Right.
nobody would go. I wouldn't say nobody, but patron levels at bars went down significantly to the point that the mafia bosses started saying, "This guy has got to be caught." I mean, it was affecting their income. Yet at the same time, I mean, there are people that get shot in New York every single day. People die in car accidents, and people don't have that type of visceral reaction. So you have to examine the letters and say, okay, why exactly did these letters scare people so bad?
Right, right. I mean, they were great. It was a great way to ramp up fear, much
Mm-hmm.
like the Zodiac killings, right? Ramp up random fear of death. That's what you do.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean,
it's intentional.
it's like the equivalent of psychological warfare.
Yeah, yeah. It's some kind of psychological warfare, and those are the similarities in the Myers book.
Mm-hmm.
That Sons of Zodiac or whatever. There's some very strange similarities. Same use of these letters to scare people. Same finding the person to do the outlet. Like, it's thought through. Like,
Yes.
try to get maximum media saturation. Like, this is really strange era. Is there anything else you'd like to add? We're almost at the 40 minute mark. Is there anything else you're working on, or anything you'd like to?
There are some other things that I'm working on. I'm actually in the process of working on an astrology certification because I want to um, take the victims and chart them out natally, and as well as the dates that they were shot, to see if there's any type of significant pattern that can be found. Because if the group was going as far to organize them on the level that I feel like I've already demonstrated, I think that they would be likely to chart them as well. I would also like to talk about Carl a little bit, if that's okay, because
Sure,
we had discussed that before.
please do.
Um, like I'd said earlier in the podcast, David mailed me the John Paul Ranieri letter on the 8th of June, um, which is the date that he sat down with Carl and Mike Caparelli and reverted and said he shot Carl. I personally do not believe he shot Carl. I have talked to David Berkowitz in writing since July of 2022. I believe that there were a lot of circumstances that led up to him reverting, and I understand he's in maximum security. He worked with a lot of people that would be threats, and obviously, talking in a maximum security environment isn't conducive to making friends. Um, I think that the way Joshua Zeman handled the distribution of documents made David's life miserable for a lot of years. He didn't do proper background checks on these people to make sure that they were well fitted to have possession of the documents. Certain people involved with the documents liberally distributed them to NYPD employees and other people, which made David's life miserable. Joshua Zeman did not enforce the NDA, which he should have enforced it. Carl has fully admitted that he feels like that he pressed David for too much additional information on his shooter. I was also questioning him, and David's had a lot of harassment in the community on behalf of his friends. I think he had a reason for reverting and saying, I acted alone. I don't speak on his behalf. I'm only expressing my opinion. But like I said, I've been in contact with him for almost 3 years, and I have no reason to believe that he acted alone in the 44 caliber killings.
Right. And like some of your stories are this whole like operation together, like these weird bars with weird names and former churches and mafia. Like it's such a dark era. That 70s to me was really, it had a sinister sensibility or vibe to it or something. I don't know how to explain
Well, I would say the United States was very much having an existential crisis at that time. We'd come out of World War II, a couple decades before. We'd come out of the Korean War, the Vietnam War. All sorts of drugs were dropped into the American public, likely at the hand of the CIA. We were having an economic crisis. We had the threat of communism. It was, like you said, it was a dark time, and people acted out because of it.
Yeah, I think so. And that's like the process. There was this fear of nuclear Armageddon that people really felt. Like, I don't think it was fake. Like, I think that there was a looming threat. So people had this sense of like, possible world end. It was palpable. And I think that it created a zeitgeist or a kind of psychosphere that
there does seem to be a pattern of cults and other strange religious beliefs popping up during times of war and afterwards. I mean, you look at churches that popped up around the Civil War and afterwards, in World War II and World War One, and you'll see a trend, and it's really no different with the process. Church of the Final Judgment coming into existence during a really challenging time in world history.
Yeah, 60s and 70s really were terrible. Vietnam was horrible like that. It's just incredible stuff. Like the violence in Phoenix and My Lai is just like, people block that out. I'm glad they do, but like horrible things happen. I tell this story once in another podcast. Like one of my teachers was an ex-Vietnam vet, and he told us stories that like today, like all of he would have got put in jail, but like really horrible things happen. Anyway, it's such a great to talk with you. Criminal Justice Chris, where can people find your work?
They can find my work on Medium. You can create a Medium account for free. If you want to pay for a Medium subscription, you can also get access to more articles. I publish all of my articles without a paywall, so I'm not getting paid. You can read them without an account as well, but if you want to comment, you're going to need to create an account. Gotcha. And you can follow me as well.
And it's medium.com at Criminal Justice Chris, all one word, right?
That's correct.
So I'll put a link in the show notes to that. But we covered just kind of updates to the Son of Sam, the Occult. You've done a lot of great work kind of talking about. A lot of people overlook a lot of that stuff. They may see it, but they don't analyze it. So I think you've done a great job of analyzing, and that whole moon cycle is really good. So,
and I just want to be clear too that most good majority of the research is mine. David did not provide me with a lot of this information. But I have sent him most of my research, and he'll tell me typically whether he agrees with me or he doesn't. But for the most part, he's in a situation where he can't really communicate too well, unfortunately. So
okay, well, thanks so much. Thanks so much for sharing your research again, Chris. Excuse me, I can't seem to say that word today. Criminal Justice Chris. And Medium is where you'll find all her work. Thanks so much for your time.
All right. Thank you.
Stay there.